Hey YouTube, matches 860. Out at the park, smoking the Friday Savinelli with some McBaron Scottish blend. Really liking this stuff. Before I begin, I want to give a shout out to Steve Price, who was instrumental in getting me motivated to do this video. Steve's fairly new to YouTube and has told a couple of stories from his childhood, and got me interested in telling this story. I'll put a link down in the bucket. Go check him out. So the year was 1966, and it was probably early June. I was still in school, and must have been a Saturday night. As usual, after dinner I was interested in getting another hour of adventure in outside. Went flying out the back door over to the neighborhood in back of me. There was a yard over to the right. When I got to the street back there, they usually had all the kids in it, but nobody was out. Directly across the street, another friend of mine lived there. Looked into his yard and saw him sitting on an open porch at the end of the house. So I crossed the street and went up the front stairs onto the lawn and felt something hitting my chest as I was walking across his lawn. I looked over and he's got a straw in his mouth. Obviously, I was the victim of a pea shooting. I knew about pea shooting, but I had never had the chance to do it. So I walked over to him and he pulls a straw out of his pocket and gave it to me. So we started walking around his yard. We're shooting at trees and rocks, and we were in his driveway and shot a couple of peas that bounced up and hit the hubcap of his father's car. That sounded terrific. He says, "We should go to the bush across the street, hide inside it, and when, excuse me, when a car comes by, we'll, pelt them with peas." That seemed pretty innocent. What could a pea do to a car? So we head over to this bush. It was a huge forsythia bush in this person's yard, right on the edge of the sidewalk. Every kid in the neighborhood at some point or another hid in there when we were playing hide and seek. So we crawl underneath and get inside the bush. Sat down and we're waiting for a car to come along. Sure enough, car comes driving by. We were loaded up with about a dozen peas each. Shot the peas at the car. We had about 2 dozen peas ricocheting around the inside of the bush. That was a disaster. After the car went by, decided we were going to have to refigure this. You couldn't stand up, but we were like crouched down looking for openings in the bush. All of a sudden we heard some voices coming down the sidewalk. It was on my side. Found a spot I could look through. And I recognized this one girl. She lived up at the beginning of the street. They were like the only normal family in the neighborhood. Nobody liked them. The other girl looked vaguely familiar. She at one point had lived in the house next door to this girl. Which incidentally was the same house that Phil and I went to in one of my stories when the kid there I knew moved away. This girl was obviously back for a visit, had a dog with her. So they were walking along the sidewalk, and I reported what I saw to my buddy. We both kind of looked at each other like, you know, we're not going to shoot. We'll wait till they go by. So they get closer to the bush, and they were talking about Coney Island hot dogs. We're looking at each other, rolling our eyes like, what? WTF, you know? Next thing we know, the dog is under the bush with us. Tail wagging, he wanted to play. We started pushing him away and throwing dirt at him. He's going, "Rrr, rrr." Like, oh geez. Well, one of the girls said, I think he found something in the bush. I thought I was going to bust a gut laughing. Put my mouth onto my arm so I wouldn't make any noise. The next thing we know, it's getting all light in the bush. And I looked up, and this girl's got the branches spread apart, and she's looking in. She let out this ear-piercing, unbelievable scream. Screaming bloody murder. Her friend says, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" She goes, "There's a man in the bush." The dog was spooked at this point. He was doing like 60 miles an hour out to the sidewalk. I looked out. This girl was hanging on to the leash. She was like body surfing down the sidewalk. The other girl had gotten caught up in the leash, was airborne at one point, and they were both wearing these loose skirts that were in fashion at that time. And their skirts were like up around their necks. They were bouncing around and rolling all over the place. So we were terrified. We didn't know what we had done, but there was this big scene. The one girl's still body surfing up the sidewalk, and the other one's rolling out into the street. She got up and ran after the other one, and we could hear him screaming all the way up the street. We got out of those bushes, hearts pounding. One of those situations where at one minute we were laughing, the next we were back to being terrified. Went up to his porch and sat on the bench there, trying to get back to normal. We hear voices coming down the street. Two girls coming back. They look like hell. They brought the father with them. He's carrying this big stick. The whole way walking down the sidewalk. There's the bush, there's a guy in there, flush him out. Poor guy. He goes over to the bush and he's kind of sizing it up, and I don't think he really knew what he was getting himself into and had second thoughts, and he's poking the bush and talking to it, and finally opens up the branches and looks back at these two girls like they're idiots. We're up on the porch just shaking our heads. This whole problem has escalated. They go walking back, and the whole way down the sidewalk, the girls, there was a guy in there. Terrifying. When I think about it now, it was really funny. But I'll never forget how scared we were. Out for a little fun, and the unthinkable happens. So that's my pea shooting story. Thanks an awful lot for joining me. And I think we'll take a quick look at it's not much to see, but we'll look anyway. The soccer field. Got to loosen you up a little bit. There we go.